I woke up in my bedroom, blinking against the pale morning light filtering through the curtains. The air felt heavy with an unsettling familiarity, like a dream lingering just out of reach. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the strange feeling of déjà vu that wrapped itself around my thoughts. Everything seemed normal at first glance. The soft hum of the fan, the digital clock blinking 7 a.m., and the faint scent of my morning coffee drifting from the kitchen. But as I swung my legs out of bed and stood up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if the world had shifted slightly out of focus, like a picture hanging crookedly on the wall. I moved through my morning routine with the same motions I performed every day, yet everything felt strangely unfamiliar. The toothbrush bristles seemed stiffer against my gums, and the water from the faucet was a degree too cold. As I poured my coffee, the splash seemed louder, echoing in the quiet kitchen more than usual. I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror and hesitated, noticing a shadow flit across my features before vanishing. Each small detail seemed to conspire to unsettle me, pulling at the edges of my mind like whispers I couldn't quite hear. I shrugged it off, trying to attribute it to a poor night's sleep or the remnants of a fading dream. Yet the unease lingered, a persistent gnawing at the back of my mind, reminding me that something was not right with this day. As I stepped outside, the world seemed to hold its breath, and the shadows of my neighborhood stretched unusually long across the pavement. It felt as if the day was waiting, poised to reveal its secrets, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The day unfolded like any other, but as the hours ticked by, a series of unsettling events began to unravel around me. It started subtly, a flicker of movement at the corner of my eye, a shadow that seemed to slither away when I turned to look. I tried to dismiss it, blaming it on my imagination, but the sense of being watched only grew stronger. As I made my way to work, the whispers began. They were faint at first, just a soft murmur blending with the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. But as I walked down the empty street, they grew clearer, more insistent, as if the wind itself was calling my name. I paused, glancing around, but the street was empty, the windows of nearby houses reflecting nothing but sunlight. I shook my head and continued on, a chill creeping down my spine. At the office, things only got worse. Faces seemed unfamiliar. Colleagues whom I'd known for years gave me blank, unrecognizing stares. I caught sight of reflections in glass panes that didn't match the movements of their sources, fleeting glimpses of something dark and distorted. Panic gnawed at my thoughts, but I forced myself to focus on my work, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread. But the whispers followed me, echoing in the silence between keystrokes, and the figures in the shadows seemed to draw closer, lurking just beyond the reach of the fluorescent lights. As evening fell, I hurried home, the sensation of being pursued growing unbearable. I locked the door behind me and tried to calm myself, but every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. I could feel it then, a presence in the room, cold and malevolent, pressing in on me from all sides. Suddenly, the whispers rose to a crescendo, a cacophony of voices clawing at my mind. I spun around, heart pounding, as the shadows coalesced into a dark figure, its eyes gleaming with a terrible hunger. Before I could scream, it lunged at me, and a searing pain tore through my chest. I stumbled, the world tilting wildly, and then everything went black. The last thing I heard was the echo of my own voice, mingled with the whispers, as if mocking me as I fell into oblivion. I jolted awake, gasping for breath, my heart racing as though I had just run a marathon. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and I found myself back in my bed. For a moment, I lay there, disoriented, convinced that the events of the previous day had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. But the sensation of déjà vu was even stronger this time, a suffocating presence wrapping itself around me. I sat up slowly, my mind racing with confusion and dread. Everything was exactly the same. The clock blinking 7 a.m., the faint aroma of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. It was as if I had been thrust back in time. As I went about my morning routine, I noticed subtle differences, tiny cracks in the facade of normalcy. The toothbrush bristles felt softer this time, and the water from the faucet was slightly warmer. I scrutinized my reflection in the mirror, half expecting to see that flicker of a shadow again, but it remained unchanged, staring back at me with weary eyes. I tried to rationalize it as an odd coincidence, a lingering effect of stress or sleep deprivation. But the memories of that dark figure, the whispers, and the cold terror of the previous night were etched into my mind, impossible to dismiss. Determined to change the course of events, I altered my routine. I left for work earlier, took a different route, and avoided the empty streets where the whispers had haunted me. Yet the sense of unease persisted, growing heavier with each passing hour. At the office, the variations were subtle but disconcerting. An unfamiliar voice on the phone, a misplaced document on my desk. I clung to the hope that these changes would alter the outcome, that I could somehow break free from this cycle. As evening descended, my anxiety reached a fever pitch. I left work early, opting to walk through a bustling street crowded with people, hoping their presence would protect me from whatever dark force hunted me. But even among the throngs of strangers, I felt its gaze, a relentless shadow dogging my every step. When I reached home, the whispers returned, more insistent than before. The presence closed in, and despite my efforts to change my fate, the darkness found me once again. The shadowy figure materialized in the corner of my room, its eyes gleaming with that same malevolent hunger. It lunged, and pain exploded through me, my screams swallowed by the darkness as I was dragged once more into oblivion. The last thought that flickered through my mind was the terrifying realization that I was trapped, caught in an endless cycle with no escape. I awoke again, the now familiar sensation of déjà vu greeting me like an unwelcome companion. As the cycles repeated, I lost track of how many times I'd woken to the same morning, the same routine, only to meet the same violent end by nightfall. Desperation clawed at me, a frantic need to understand why I was trapped in this hellish loop. I began to approach each day as if it were a puzzle, searching for clues and trying to unravel the mystery behind this nightmare. I meticulously noted every variation, every minute difference from one cycle to the next. It became clear that nothing was random. Each change, no matter how small, seemed to serve a purpose, a dark thread woven into the fabric of my existence. The whispers, initially a source of terror, became my only allies, offering cryptic hints that I struggled to decipher. I spent hours trying to understand their meaning, piecing together fragments of a sinister story hidden within their sibilant tones. As I navigated through the loops, I began to notice a pattern emerging. The shadows that pursued me, the figures lurking at the edges of my vision, grew bolder with each cycle. I realized they were not merely manifestations of my fear, but part of something larger, a force that was orchestrating these events with chilling precision. With each death, the figure that came for me seemed to relish the terror it invoked, as if feeding off my fear. I understood then that I was being targeted, ensnared in a game designed by a malevolent entity that thrived on my suffering. The realization hit me like a cold wave. My deaths were not accidental but intentional, each one a grotesque culmination of a plan I could not yet comprehend. It was as if this force was trying to communicate with me, to show me something through the repetition of my own demise. I became determined to outsmart it, to use the knowledge I had gathered to find a way out. I spent my days experimenting, testing theories, and attempting to break the cycle, hoping to finally uncover the truth behind this endless nightmare. Yet as the shadows closed in each night, I felt the weight of my failures, the sinister presence mocking my efforts. But even in the face of despair, I clung to a fragile hope that I would eventually uncover the secret that would set me free. I woke up again, but this time, the fear that had plagued me for so long was tempered with resolve. I was determined to break free from this endless cycle. After countless loops, I had finally pieced together enough knowledge to face the dark force head-on. Throughout the days, I had discovered subtle weaknesses in the shadowy figure's presence. It seemed to grow stronger when I succumbed to fear, feeding off my terror. But I had also noticed that certain actions, certain choices, seemed to weaken its hold. Armed with this understanding, I crafted a plan for the ultimate showdown. As the day unfolded, I went through my routine with a new purpose, mentally mapping out every step, every decision. I took a different path to work, one that led me through a crowded park, hoping to disrupt the force's connection. I engaged with strangers, drawing strength from their presence, and resisted the temptation to isolate myself in my fear. I spent the day gathering items that seemed to hold significance in previous cycles, objects that had been touched by light or marked by the whispers. I felt the weight of the whispers around me, urging me forward, guiding me toward what I hoped would be my salvation. When evening came, I returned home, the sense of dread hanging over me like a storm cloud. The shadows pressed in, the whispers intensifying, but I was ready. I arranged the objects around the room, forming a protective circle, and stood in its center, facing the dark corners where the figure would emerge. As the shadows thickened, the figure appeared, more menacing than ever. Its eyes gleamed with malevolence, but I stood my ground, refusing to give in to the fear that had consumed me before. I spoke the words I had deciphered from the whispers, a chant that resonated with power, disrupting the figure's form. The air crackled with energy as the room filled with a blinding light, the dark force writhing and shrinking under its intensity. For a moment, I felt a sense of victory, the oppressive weight lifting as the shadows began to dissolve. But just as I thought I had won, the light flickered, and a chilling laugh echoed through the room. The figure lunged at me one last time, and everything went black. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in the silence of my bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and I lay there, unsure if I had truly broken the cycle or if I was trapped in its grip once more. As I rose to face the day, the whispers were gone, leaving me with an unsettling silence and the question of whether the nightmare had truly ended or if it would begin again.